I think many times we also hear the excuse that we make ourselves that we don't have enough time to pray. Yet we do have time for so many other things. And I think what is most interesting is that with time, as you are growing in your relationship to God, you also realize, or at least ideally, you should realize how much time you are wasting, how much time we are wasting. Because the problem is that when we think about prayer, we think of it as something that is done in addition to our daily activities. That means that when we are not working, or when we are not studying, or when we are not sleeping and eating, you have uh, periods of time that are called free time or leisure time. And then you are free to choose what you do in that time. We usually reserve that time for something that we choose to do instead of having to do. So, obviously, that does not include the time that you are spending at work or you are doing something that is work related or college related or anything of that kind or other duties. And in those times, in those free times, we prefer to, I don't know, what is popular these days? Probably browsing Facebook aimlessly and watching pointless videos on YouTube. I don't know. What is also very popular is watching series, and I do know the very strong temptation of that. But these are all things that, or you find a hobby, and that hobby might be expensive, or might be just time consuming, and we find that we can't really fit prayer uh, in our day because we have these other free times, and you can't really um, put that on top of it, on top of all that you would otherwise do. And and this is why we need to stop and think that is prayer a duty? Because if prayer is a duty that you have to do, if it is kind of work, then it's obvious that you cannot do that in your free time. Because if it is exhausting, it is, how do you say that? Straining. So if it is work from your perspective, then you can't do that in your free time. And of course, you wouldn't want to do something when you're trying to relax that will not put you in a state of tranquility. It's very logical. Now, here's the thing. If you approach prayer as not just an activity and not even as something that's a free time activity, because you could assume, I mean, theoretically, that praying is as relaxing as watching TV. But the thing is, that is much more than just relaxation because it is a connection with God. a connection with the heavenly things. And when you understand that, how much more it transcends any activity, be it work or be it leisure activity, when you realize how much prayer transcends all of that, you will realize the true benefit of it. But of course, I'm not saying that the point of prayer is that you feel good about it, because again, that would be about emotions, and this is also, I think, at the beginning, very hard to understand and accept that it's not going to make you feel automatically good. You do feel the benefits of it, but not in a very emotional sense. It's not just for worldly benefits like your own well-being, because you could argue that it's similar to meditation, and it clears your mind and helps you focus on yourself. Well, there you can see the problems beginning if you only assume that prayer is for a practical purpose for yourself. I'm not saying that. It also belongs to that. But prayer is for the benefit of everyone. I mean, there are very different kinds of prayer. So you can pray for someone else, or well, if you read the Psalms, for example, you see that there is prayer for the individual who is praying it, there is prayer for others for blessing, and there are curses as well. So you see that prayer is very diverse if you only read the Psalms. And so it is much more than that. And you are always praying for the whole world. So you are not alone in prayer, but you are with God and all the saints and all the angels. It's like in liturgy. But prayer is typically something that you do in private. By the way, worship is also prayer, of course. That's even a highest form of prayer. But when we talk, because I think we can't really treat them separately, because when we are talking about time dedicated to prayer, we also need to address time dedicated to visiting, to going to church, going to the liturgy and other services, because yes, they are also prayer, and much more than that, maybe. So, but if you want to pray and you want to spend that time in prayer, then you will also have this inclination to go to church and do that at church and participate in the services. So the point is that you should be praying, but not just in a superficial sense. I think I didn't know how to pray for a very, very long time. Even after I thought I became a Christian, it was something very challenging. And to this day is very challenging. Because technically you could spend a whole day in prayer, even putting aside sleep. I think everyone could do that. But the question is, are you actually praying? Because the problem with me, at least, is that I am distracted too quickly. So I mean, technically say that I am praying, I'm not actually praying, and it's bad, because it's pointless entirely if you are trying to pray. Let's say in the extreme case, you try to pray for 24 hours, and you are really determined. I am going to pray. It's not something that I've ever tried, but let's assume that you do it, and you will be distracted, or at least I would be distracted. Even if I wanted to, I could just not concentrate, and we all know that feeling. And I think at the beginning I haven't even tried to pray like that because I just did not understand the concept of staying silent because I still have the feeling that I am like I think it's called hyperactive. You know, children with this hyperactivity who just can't focus. They have a very short attention span, and I think part of it is developing, improving that attention span in a spiritual way, so that you can focus. And what better way to train yourself than the Jesus prayer? And you can pray that anywhere and anytime. But especially, you should try just sitting in front of an icon and just trying to pray the Jesus prayer. Or you can pray other things too. Well, there is one problem that I have encountered, that if you are reading a prayer book, you can't look at the icon. This is a practical thing. But if you just try the Jesus prayer, you can actually look at the icon and pray at the same time, which is great. And I think after a while, you can somehow get used to that. Again, in a spiritual way. When I say spiritual, I mean through the Holy Spirit, because you are praying through the Holy Spirit. And after a while, you get used to it and it becomes easier. And with time, you may realize that you don't even need to do the other things that you would normally do instead of prayer. But you become passionate, hopefully, for it. And you feel that you can't really live without it. I also need to emphasize again that you should avoid spiritual delusion and think that, you know, just praying is good enough. Because of course you should also act, and you can read in the Bible, it's very clear. Yes, Jesus says, go to your inner room and close the door and pray. But also other times we are called to act, like helping others in your environment, whoever needs your help, and in whatever ways you can. So it's not just inactivity. And again, we also understand the point of monasticism, because monasticism is then for people who are practicing all of these. Well, it depends on the tradition, how much that monastery or monk is involved in the other activities, but what is common is prayer, of course. And monks are usually, ideally, people who realize that prayer is everything. Well, not everything, because God is the goal, but prayer can fill their lives in such a way that they feel that they don't even need anything else. And this is how you can understand, because I have mentioned, what if you pray for 24 hours? And you will realize that even if you try to pray, you can't always pray, because sometimes you need to eat. And when you're eating, it's very difficult to pray because you're focusing on chewing the food. And also when you're sleeping, you're not I think technically it's possible to pray while you sleep, but let's admit that we don't really have very holy dreams. So when we are dreaming, we are literally just fantasizing about things, and you can certainly sin in your dreams too, because if you go on a rampage with a machine gun in your dream, then you can't really say that it does not reflect your personality in some way, because it does. Probably you have anger in yourself, but I'm not very much into the interpretation of dreams, but I think in very many cases it's obvious what these dreams mean. So but from this you can understand why fasting is so important, and being vigilant and holding vigil. I mean, vigil in the sense, I mean, in the Byzantine rite, we have, I think, in the Roman rites earlier, it was also usual, and it still does exist, but it's not as common these days, I think. So vigil is, or at least in the Russian Orthodox Church, for example, vigil is usually made up of a Vespers service followed by a Matins service, and it's called a vigil, which is which goes into the night, and it's a bit longer, but it's not, mostly it's not actually staying awake all night. But vigil, of course, I'm not quite sure what the word vigil means. Probably it's Latin, but I don't really know the meaning. Um, but it also means staying up late and spending that time in prayer or not sleeping at all. We read that many saints only slept a few hours a day, which means I think it means probably more that they just didn't need sleep. I'm not sure how tired they were, but I think it is, as with many things, that you realize that you don't need many things, and sleep is one of them. I think most people, if they tried sleeping a few hours only a day, actually, very many people, I think, sleep only a few hours, but not because they're spending that time in prayer, but because we are so stressed and we have insomnia and we just work too much, and so we are not vigilant for the right reasons. But you can imagine that you can do that for God, so to say, and also fasting, because it is also, because these are basically the two things that we all need to do: eat and sleep. And but even these can be set aside. But it means a lot of you need to dedicate your life to God in such to such a degree that you can do that. But again, these are not the goal. The ultimate goal is to be with God, and these are just tools, of course. But still, so you need to. I think we need to change our perspective on prayer, because I think most people, when they hear about it, or they know that someone is praying, they would think that that poor person, because it is so miserable, right? Praying, spending time in with something that is pointless, useless, frustrating, annoying, and hypocritical even. But we need to change that, really. And if you read, it's in the letter of James, that the prayer of the righteous is very efficient. So you need to keep in mind that this is really the challenge, that you can achieve very many things in prayer, but you need to ask fervently, and that is difficult. But not because it is difficult on its own. It's not the prayer that's difficult. It's getting rid of the things that prevent you from praying. Because if you are not spending that time in prayer, your free time, then the devil will come and he will give you things to do. He will keep you occupied. And you all know that when we are bored and we feel that we have nothing to do, immediately you have ideas what you should do. And they're not holy thoughts, and you will not do anything that is conducive to your spiritual health and your relationship with God, but it's probably going to be something evil. that only feeds your lust. So again, you can get rid of many things in your life, and it will get better because you will realize that you become lighter. Because sometimes you can feel that physically, even that when you are loaded with all these baggages that you carry around, baggages that tell you that you need me, the things that would take your free time, when you get rid of them, you feel lighter and you have more time to spend in prayer with God. But these are difficult to grasp because we are addicted to our sensory pleasures, that I need to see something happening. I need to hear something like loud music constantly in the background. We all know that when the TV and the radio are always running in the background, because we do not want to have silence, because we think that silence is almost toxic. It's unbearable. In Hungarian, there is an expression "síri csend." And "síri csend" means, literally it means grave silence. But grave here is actually referring to the grave that people are buried. So the silence of the dead. And I think this is how most of us was the modern man, how the modern man would describe silence in general. That it's grave. It's like this the silence of a graveyard. And again, graveyard is a very good image because again, you need to die to the world. You need to be risen with Christ, and this is how you can imagine prayer. Yes, it is. When you look at someone who is you're thinking about someone who is praying, yes, that person is probably dead to the world, dead to the things that others would think are full of life, and he or she chooses something different. So yes, it is a dead thing, partly, but it is also life. This is how that's the most lively thing, to be with God. But we need to open our eyes in a way that we can't do just yet. And you need to open yourself to not to a different reality, because God and heaven are not a different reality, but to maybe I could say to higher things, but that's too general. You need to open your mind to God and see the difference it makes.